Welcome to Just Blazor Programming, and before I get started, let me give you a quick thank you, quick shout out for the 340 subs who have joined me, and I will continue making more videos in the future. Just keep writing your comments as to what you want to see. Now, on today's video, we're going to be learning about reusable templates. Now, reusable templates are very important in Blazor because Blazor is all about using components and reusing your code without rewriting it, obviously. This is how Angular and React worked as well. So this is how you're going to use Blazor effectively when it goes to your front-end development. In order to create a reusable template, you must use something called the render fragment. Now, if you've never heard of what a render fragment is, it's basically how we handle passing in HTML code. So on screen, I'm going to show you something of an example as to what I'm talking about here. So this is just a counter from the counter component that comes with the startup Blazor. So here, in my other videos, I've discussed adding parameters to the components through between the alligators. So here's where you would normally add like a parameter that is being expected by the component. But this space here is a little bit different. I have not taught you yet how to get information from here or how to pass information from here and use it. In order to do that, this is not technically a parameter. This is something else entirely. And in order to get this information, you need to use something called a render fragment as your parameter instead. So in case you wanted the information between the two brackets, this is what this video is going to be for. And that is the key to making your reusable templates. So I just shown you an example of where the render fragment is going to be within a component, but I have not actually taught you what is a render fragment. I've given you the definition of it. A render fragment in Blazor is just a class that injects embedded content into the component. So it works kind of like a parameter, except that what you're injecting into it is between the brackets, and what the type is going to be just a render fragment. So it could be an HTML, it could be plain text, it could be a lot of things. It's just not a primitive data type like we're used to. So this is the key into creating reusable templates, because this is how we will keep reusing code over and over again in order to create, let's say, a grid, a table, or any number of other objects that we might need in our project. In fact, in this particular project, we're going to create a reusable grid. The grid is a very good example because you will run into this nearly in every job. All jobs require you to create some sort of grid to show information to the user in some way. So I believe that a grid is probably the best way of showing off how a render fragment works and how to use reusable templates, because now it doesn't matter what kind of information goes into that grid or what kind of types go into that grid. We will have a uniform grid to be used all over our project and not worry about whether it's going to work or whether it's going to look different to whatever style we have set up. So it's just going to be a very simple grid, no sorting, no nothing, but it will at least teach you the basics of using render fragments and making reusable code in Blazor. So let's get started. So I have here the project that I just created. I call it the reusable sample app. So you call it whatever you want. This is a brand new project that has not been edited just yet. So this is what you saw before. That was just a counter example that already existed in the startup project. So before, just letting you know. So the first thing we want to do is add our component to this tab here, even though we don't have it existing yet, just to make sure that it's there. So what I have here is I've already written the tab code. We're going to call it usable. Reusable component. And we're just going to call it reusable component. That's all we're going to do for the tab for now. And now we're going to make the component in our pages folder. Component. And this is a server, the server project. It makes no difference I believe it makes no difference. Use one or the other, but I just use this because it's really easy to get started. Reusable component. So in this case, because we're going to have a little bit of code and I want to start using best practices, I'm going to do something called a code behind, and I'm going to put the C# code behind, quote unquote, the Razor component. So that means that I'm going to separate where this code's going to go into its own separate page and class, but it's still going to refer to the same component. So if you have not seen what a code behind is, I have a video about it right here, somewhere there. And I would encourage you to go see it once we're done here. But if not, then I'm just going to show you here how to do what I'll show you what I'm going to do right now. So we go here, we're going to add a new class, a new C# class, and make sure you give it the exact same name as the component we want this to be attached to. Oopsie daisy. So it's going to be called Reusable Component. I'll make sure you write it right. RE.razor.cs. So what this will do is this will basically scaffold it into the Razor, or so that it will be attached to it. But it will work the exact same way that this code works over here. Except that it just, I believe, will give you cleaner code and it will allow you to scale the component better. So as you can see, we have created the scaffolding here. We have attached the ReusableComponent.razor.cs to our reusable component. But we're not done yet. As you can see, we have an issue here. So we gotta add a partial class to it, and that will fix the issue. For whatever reason, every time that you want to do something like this, you have to add this partial class to it. It doesn't do it on its own. So just keep that in mind. But now we could add whatever code we were planning on adding here to here. So we don't have to actually add it into put all the code in one place. This will allow us to make cleaner code for the future. But we are not done yet. We're gonna need, so the plan is to create two grids, basically two grids. One of the grids will be how you will make it manually. So if that is rewriting your code over and over again, and the other grid is gonna be using the reusable grid, the reusable component we're gonna create. So to do that, we're gonna need some data. In order to make this data, we're gonna create services, and services require interfaces. So we're going to create two of them for two different sets of data so that you know that this is a reusable component that does not matter what kind of data that goes into the grid. So just follow me here. The first thing we're going to do is create the interfaces that we're going to need. So in our data, I'm going to create a new folder. Call it grid data. And within here, we're going to create two interfaces and two classes that inherit from those interfaces. So just start with the interfaces first. Go to our interface. And the first interface is going to be IR data. The I is just the convention that people use when it comes to interfaces. So I like to stick to that. And this is going to be a car data interface because we're going to have car data. So in case you haven't figured that out. So for this, we're just going to have one method put into it. And it's going to be real easy. It's going to be list.car. But we don't have this car created yet. So that's fine for now. We could just create that. Create a new item. Create the car class. Technically, this is going to be a model, but fine. So I already have some data prepared. I'm just going to copy paste it from my other screen. So we are having int, 2 strings, and a decimal here. And it really doesn't matter what kind of things you have here. You could have any of the primitives if you feel like it. I'm just choosing these primitives, and I'm only going to have 4 properties. Because in the other one, we're going to have different primitives, different types, and more properties than this one to show you that it doesn't matter what how different they are, as long as they're just simple types, as long as you can put them in the grid, the reusable grid will work. So that will be our car class. This should be fine now. Perfect. So in here, we're also going to add another interface, but We're going to call this instead YouTube Analytics, because we're going to refer to analytics of YouTube. So these are two completely different things, ideas. So you know that it's going to work regardless. So in this interface, we're just going to have basically the same class. A get method in. Oh, oops, I didn't put the I. The YouTube Analytics data. Call it that. And poof. So it's going to be called YouTube Analytics data. And in here, we're just going to add another get list class. We're going to create. This doesn't exist yet, but we'll create it now. Item class YouTube Analytics. And again, I have data prepared already, so we could skip some of this. As you can see here, I have more data than before. But here I have it is subscribed, watch time hours, username, user email, is female subscriber. Did you know that 100% of you are males, according to the YouTube Analytics? Therefore, if there is one, that's not true. So make sure that when you add this property here, it's a public property, and you always get false. It's never going to be real. It's not going to be true, unfortunately. That's how it goes when it comes to tech channels. So in this case, we actually have 5 properties. A Boolean instead. We have an integer and 2 strings. So yeah, so I think this is pretty good. We have a nice diverse range of data types here. So now that we have our interface and now that we have our object, what are we missing? Well, we're gonna need data. So now we're gonna add the data into the actual data. So we don't have a database to call data from. We're just gonna make them on the fly using a class here. That. So again, we're gonna do the same thing. And add a new item, new class. And this will be the class that will inherit the interfaces in order to call those methods and populate the data for a grid. In this case, we'll call it YouTube data. So YouTube data will inherit from YouTube Analytics data. If you want, you can just let it populate it for you. Limit the interface here. But I already have some code ready to go again. I'm just going to copy paste it. You let me know if you just want to see me type everything out again, because I could do that. But I just have everything already pre-written, and I can just copy paste it and give you like a moment to go through the code yourself. Because there's a lot going on here. So I'm just going to run through it real quick. So within here, I have a random class here. I also have a list of the YouTube analytics that we're going to return. And here, these are all the YouTube objects that we're going to add in there. So you have your is subscribe property, watch time hours, username, user email is female. These the actual properties doesn't exist, or that mean that doesn't exist. Doesn't matter. These are just what I wrote in there. Whatever I wanted. So I have my near perfect user with 100 to 300 hours. You're the perfect one. But I have some new guys here who have 0 to 50 hours. I have the best one, that the one who is obviously is gonna return false. Have that written in there. The female enthusiast with 1,000 to 5,000 hours, the most perfect one. And then in reality is 0 to 5 hours, no emails, no subscription, none. So that's just what I wrote. You can write whatever you want here. It really makes no difference. Just remember to add just a few of these in there so you can see the grid actually do its thing. So that was my YouTube data. Now we're gonna make the car data. Second. We're gonna do the exact same thing that we did here. Go here, add a new item. We're gonna add the car data class. Same thing here. We're gonna inherit from the car data interface. Not implemented. Don't worry, we're gonna implement it right now. And you know the drill. It's basically just add a list of car data here. In our case, it's a list of cars. What we want to return. And then you just add whatever you want. So I have some VIN numbers with another random in there between two really big numbers. And then whatever the make and model is going to be with a decimal in there between another two decently large numbers. So you do this to whatever you want. In this case, I only have 3 cars. You know, it's not as fun as the first list. So we're done with that. So now we have our services. I mean, not our services, not yet. But we have our interfaces, our class that are models, basically. And then the class that calls upon the that inherits the interface and gives you the data you want. Well, what are we missing? So when it comes to working with things like this with direct injection, you're gonna have to add services, and your program is gonna be able to call them. So here, this is where all that's gonna be handled. So this is how the program handles generic sizing your data, basically, and calling upon these services. So we need to add those 2 services that we just created here, the car data and the YouTube data ones here. I'm gonna do that now. If you don't know what this is and you want to learn more, I can make a video about it. But for now, you just copy what I'm here to do in order to make this work. So typing a little bit here. I'm gonna add the scope. Want to create one instance each time we call it. That's what the scope means. So we're gonna add the gotta add first. It's able to actually there it is. Now I can see it. Yeah, remember to add your grid data directory here. Confusing the names. Whenever I say whenever I want to say using a directory, library, blah blah, but you know what I mean. We're gonna add for each one that we created. Interface is that would now our project can call upon this on these services and use it as we will. But again, if you want more information on that, let me know. Cool with that? Also let me know. And let me know what the proper way of calling that using thing is. Because like always, every video I always screw it up and I call it something different, you know. I'm not gonna Google. I have everything here. I'm not gonna Google it for the engagement, you know. Like if you want more engagement online, if you want the right answer, always give off the wrong answer. Someone's gonna answer you because that's how it works. Now that we have that set up, need that. We don't need that. We don't need that. That here though. First things first, let's add the page tag here. Go. Navigated to. Not just a component anymore, it's now a page. Let's go back to our class here. The partial class that is code behind to the usable component. I'm gonna add some libraries up here. And then you need access to all that stuff we just. You're gonna need this. Oh, that's not what this is. Reusable. make sure to add this here because you're going to be using the life cycle method, and I made a thing about that as well, a video. So first things first, we have to do is inject our two interfaces, our two services that like this. So now we have access up here through direct injection. You will see that momentarily, and now we need to create two lists as well. That we have our YouTube analytics list and our car list. Perfect. And now we do the oninitialize on getting the data. So if you don't know what I'm doing here, if you don't know what the life cycles methods are, I have a video for that as well. So you are not lost as to what's happening. But what basically is going on is that when this component gets rendered, before it completes the rendering process, it's going to grab the data. In order to grab the data, it needs to go through to grab the data from both the services that we've applied it. So yes, that is fine. So now our code has all the data we need in order to put this in HTML. And that's the next step we're going to do. We'll go over to the reusable component HTML here. Now it's going to be a bit of code here. So the first thing we're going to do is add a div here. Class. Because what we're planning on doing is creating two of these reusable component. They're not reusable right now, but we're going to be creating two grids that you have to keep remaking the code. You have to keep reusing the same code over and over again, which is not the good way of doing it, but I just copy pasted this here. So in case you're wondering what we're doing, we're going to check to make sure that our analytics list has something in there. It's not a null. And then we're going to create a table just for that. So we have our table with the 5 columns. These are the headers. And then this is how we're going to write our code for each of the for each analytic in the analytics list. You're going to put them into their own columns per row. So when it comes to the Boolean, the way you work with this, if you want to actually show off something in English, you would have to create an if statement and then put in HTML tags in here with whatever you want it to say. So in this case, if it's subscribed, it's a yes. If not, it's a no. And then here, the same thing with the is female thing. It's another Boolean. If it's a yes, put the tag there. If it's a no, put the tag here. The other ones are strings or numbers, so it doesn't really matter. They will be stringified all the same. That's what we're going to do with this one. For the next one, we're going to do the same thing, basically. That's where it ends. So at the end of this div, we're going to add this here. We're doing the exact same list, except this time we're going to be using the car list. And we're going to have a VIN, make, model, and price. Do the same thing. There isn't any Booleans here, so you don't have to do anything special to make it easier to read. We just have numbers and strings, basically. So same logic here. I believe for the first part of this tutorial, we are complete. Now, remember, this isn't reusable yet. We're just making two different tables we're just rewriting the same code over and over again. This isn't reusable just yet. I'm just showing you to make sure that the data works and that when we create the reusable template, you will not see a difference. That's how it looks like. So very simple. We got two tables going on, created different, not in two different ways, but they were copy pasted basically. And these tables are not reusable. We have to, if we want to create more tables in the system like this, we have to keep rewriting the same code over and over again. And that gets really clunky, as you see here. Not only that, but we will have to make sure that every time we make this code, we rewrite the same, CSS styles and what have you here. Make sure you took a good look here. We have our two grids. Perfect. So now we're gonna make the reusable template. And to do that, what we're gonna do is go to the reusable component here, and we're gonna copy, and we're gonna paste to save us some time. So we're gonna remove this stuff here for now. So here, I want you to call it reusable template instead, just to make sure that it's different. So it changed here. So you see how it says reusable component? This has to be changed. That. The reusable template. Yes, it is. So we're gonna rename this here. Avoid confusion. We'll also call this reusable template as well and create a tab for it. Not do it now. So in this case, we just copy pasted the same code. And let's go to the nav menu. We're gonna create the reusable template tab. We'll see. All this time. Didn't need this. So this will look the exact same way. I'm just gonna copy paste it just in case because So in this case, this should work as is. And if there's any issues with it, I'll tell you what happened and skip the process of debugging it. But luckily for us, nothing has changed. So go here. Let me go here. So we just copy pasted the exact same code. Don't worry about this. Remember we had random object in there so that these change. But these are the exact same thing. So now we're gonna make this template reusable, like truly reusable. So in order to do that, I'm going to grab some more code from the side grid that you do not see. Actually, we're going to leave that there. So what we're going to do is this template here. This is going to be our template example, but we need to create another component. And this will be the grid component that I'm talking about. So we're going to call it Q. So this will be the actual grid, and you will see the render fragments and all that stuff work here. So in this case, I'm not going to do a code behind. I don't think there's enough code to really justify it. So first things first, we're going to add a type param here. Type param t item. This is basically just a generic item. It's an object that we're going to use to pass in information to the grid, regardless of what the data type is. That keeps this generic. I'm just going to copy paste HTML here. Now these don't exist yet, but they're going to exist now once we add it. I'll explain to you what's going on. Now, it would be more prudent to add this reusable grid into the shared folder, but that's fine. Just remember that if you do add in an actual project, if there's a folder that is to be shared between other places, have that in a special directory just for that. In this case, because this is just a sample project trying to teach you something, it really doesn't matter. But that's just the what I'm saying. I just realized that now. So in this case, we have our render fragments. So these render fragments here are going to be your templates. I have a parameter being passed in here just for the grid name. So we're just going to change that. We're going to actually pass it in as a true parameter. You can see the difference between what's going to happen between the render fragment parameter and the actual primitive parameter. So in this case, we're going to have HTML being passed to as the header. So whatever gets passed to here is going to be built into the header. This will be a row of items. So this will take the place of adding the actual rows of stuff of data that you're trying to add, like we had in the other component. And the footer, I'm not gonna add anything really. I'll just show you what the footer does. Always gonna add maybe like a string in there, maybe. You don't really need it for this case. And this right here is gonna pass in the list of items. So that's why we have T item here, because we don't know what the object is gonna be. This is a generic class. So we're gonna pass in whatever we want through here. So this is just a read-only list of some generic objects. So let's put that into play. The reason why I made you make a copy of this reusable template is because get rid of all the other ones. Those two. The reason why I made you make a copy of this is so that we could copy paste these into the actual reusable template. I'll show you what that means. So you see this table? We're gonna just put that in, comment that out. Because what we're gonna do is we're gonna get the reusable grid. And in this component, we're gonna add all the HTML stuff in there, along with passing the parameters. So in this case, we have a parameter called grid name. What was it called? Grid name? Grid name. So here, I'm just gonna say that this is the analytic. And then we're gonna pass in the items as well. So the items being this list of items. YouTube Analytics. And now we're gonna show you the render components. So this is how you do it. We called one of them header, right? So now we're gonna pass in this. Whatever you wrote here is gonna be passed in here. As I said before, you can pass in whatever you want. In this case, we are expecting HTML to be passed in, specifically these headers be passed in here, so that when this builds it, it will build off those headers. So that's what I mean by passing in as a render fragment, and that will be the HTML that you want to use here. And now it doesn't. Now you don't have to keep rewriting this whole table code once again. All you have to do is make sure that you know what kind of headers you want, what kind of the body that you're looking for, and if you want a footer, you can add that too. I'm not gonna add a footer in this one. I add one in the next one though. In this case, next one is gonna be row. And for row, we're gonna add the same thing we had here for each. I don't row. No, we don't. Perfect. We don't need the TR here. We just the TDs, columns or whatever. But we have a problem here. We can't use the same name anymore. This analytic does not exist here. So instead, what you have to do is replace this with this context. Context would do the whole. Context deals with the whole generic stuff for passing in. Doesn't really care about the output. So in this case, where we had our analytic was the name of each object, here it has to be context. And I think for that we're done. So we could just get rid of this. And we're going to do the same thing, cars here. Follow the same thing. So because you've already saw me do it already, I'm just going to copy paste what I have here and save some time. But just know that it's the exact same process. All I did was take the VIN header, the make, model, price, all the headers. I took all the objects here and I added a footer here. I'll test foot to see how that looks like. It's not gonna look good, but you know, what can you do? But just make sure that when you do that, you replace the name of whatever we called the car object context. So whatever, I call it car list 2, and it is called car list in. So I believe that is all. And it will all be within the row. Within the column. Just make sure that you didn't delete the div for it. Sometimes I do that. Okay, I think we're good to go. Let's see. One take Willy. That's what my name is going to be. Only one take and it all works. We have our component here. This is the old one. And now this is our reusable grid. Now, I added this into the component grid by accident. But as you can see, by creating that template, and I added the footer on this one, we can make changes to it if we want to. We could reuse the same components over and over again without recreating the same code over and over again like we did here. Remember, these two were written twice. This was technically only really written once, and then we changed the whatever the HTML is going to go into this. So you could do this program. It's better for you when you're trying to write your grids programmatically instead of manually like we did here. And basically now you have a uniform way of having your program create grids and such. And this is a good example of how the render fragment works. So I like this example a lot. And you know what? I'm not going to take credit for this, actually. I'm going to put in a link below as to where I got this sample from. I think that when I was looking into this, I was having issues with how to really explore and explain the render fragment, because if you go on the Microsoft website and try to read up what a render fragment is and how it works, it's kind of confusing. So this example really clears it up for you how to use it and how to use it in a pragmatic way. So I don't want to take credit where I didn't write it. So I'm going to put the link at the bottom of the description for you guys. And if you guys out there have your own tutorials that you enjoy a lot because you read up on them on Blazor or whatever, let me know. Let me check them out, and I'll tell you whether or not it's good. I think this tutorial does two things really well. Number one, it gives you a real-world example of something you're going to be doing in Blazor, which is creating grids. Now, most likely, what's going to happen is you're going to use a third-party library to do all that, because you're going to have sorts and you're going to have special functions that you want to do, paging and all that stuff. But for a very simple grid, this is perfect. You can create your own grid from scratch and keep reusing that same component over and over again without rewriting the same code. The other thing is that this is a good way of learning how the render fragment works, and render fragments are absolutely necessary to create reusable templates. So a template like this, and even more complex ones later on. So if you guys out there enjoyed my content, let me know. If you guys want me to change things here and there, let me know. And if you have other tutorials and stuff you want me to check out, other channels you want me to check out, so I can see whether or not they're worth, having this, and I can make a video about them, let me know too. It saves me time from making up stuff on the fly. And sometimes what they create is way better than what I can create. I have to be honest here. Teaching and learning are two different things, and I want you to understand everything in the best way possible. So if you find a tutorial that you like, and I think it's a good thing, I might make a video about it. Just let me know. Anyways, I think that'll be the end of this video, and the end of my render fragment / reusable template video. Stay tuned for the next one. Peace out.